Hello and welcome today to Not Just Ads, the creator economy for B2B. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Jogen Lee. Jogen is the Chief Revenue Officer for Cookie AI. They are an AI startup that are based out of San Francisco, Palo Alto. And I'm really looking forward to getting into the conversation. They have a really interesting product and they're seeing a lot of traction in the market as well. Thanks for joining us on the show.
Thank you.
Maybe we can kick it off. You could tell us, for the audience that's unaware about Cookie, what it is you do and the customers you serve, the category that you're in, and just maybe anything you can share in terms of the company.
So in short, Cookie is a fully autonomous market intelligence AI platform that captures the voices of your customers and provide you with the synthesized report under 3 hours. Sometimes it could be an hour. So that's basically what we do. What we're trying to Our main core of technology here is our AI ability to actually hold interviews with humans, which means it's able to adaptively hold conversations like how you and I is having this communication to really probe for more additional information to understand what is a preference, perception to a category or a certain topic. Who do we serve? It's a really wide spectrum here. So we do serve people from the business units who needs quick data, especially those who are very sick and tired trying to Google for secondary desktop research information that is outdated, that is not relevant, or it's simply just not what they are looking for, right? And at the same time, they don't require a full-fledged research to engage the likes of Nielsen, Kantar, Ipsos, where I have to interview someone for 2 hours, spend hundreds of thousands. So we sit in between that fine line of speed and depth and the affordability as well.
Great. And so when you say that you sit then, is it mostly the internal data of the customer that you analyze, or is there data pools like from similar competitors as well that you analyze?
No, it's very different. So if we were to take one step back, I was originally in when we were doing a lot of qualitative studies. It's always an actual human moderator interviewing a real human. But there's a lot of gaps when it comes to that because the amount of time and energy that a single moderator or researcher have to interview one single person is limited. At most, a day you can interview up to 45 respondents. It's not scalable, right? And when there's a language barrier, I would have to hire another simultaneous translator to help my clients understand what is the entire conversation that is going on right now. So with AI being the moderator instead, we bridge the gap when it comes to language, when it comes to time zone, when it comes to cost. Because in many countries where you were to hire a really good moderator, it costs around 200 USD to 300 USD per hour. Multiply it by 10%, that is a huge amount of cost, right? But if you talk about AI, which is able to replace that, we essentially can do 5,000 surveys or 5,000 interviews with a span of 1 to 2 hours, which is unlike any other things we have seen before in the research world.
So what you do is you basically facilitate that. So let's say hypothetically pre this technology, it would be the moderator, as you mentioned, and there's only so many hours in the day that they can do that because it's like a one-to-one or even a focus group. Whereas you need input for each of the respondents. Whereas what you're saying is the AI is basically asking them the same questions, but you can do that on a multiple level so that they can get the feedback in. They're all being asked the same questions, but it's just the complete multiplier of the previous moderator's role. Is that correct?
Correct. But our goal here is not to replace conventional researchers or moderator, sitting on a sweet spot of a bit of speed and depth. And that's really the direction that we're taking, especially in today's world, where you see a lot of trends on TikTok or consumer trends that are changing and turning so fast. It's very difficult for us to use data that is not related to us, nor is it for us to wait for 6 weeks to wait for a full-fledged research to bring the data to be on our table today.
Of course.
Yeah.
So then where do you find normally, let's say you see some of these like trends that are, let's say you mentioned about a TikTok trend, where do you normally get respondents in an efficient amount of time? Is it that you have a database filled up of people that are willing to reply to questions in that case, or is there partners that you work with, or how does that normally work?
So we do have our own panel pools as well, but that is not our bread and butter. We're trying to build an ecosystem where everyone in the research world will have a part to play in this entire space. So we are doing a lot when it comes to partnerships, like we're working with Prodigy, we're working with Prolific, we're working with Emporia Research. Some of them are still in discussion to really try to find a synergy, not just on a tech level, but also on a service level on how can we create a more Amazon-like pay as you go, build as you go kind of research methodology, where it not just caters to large MSC corporations like Procter and Gamble, Unilever, but also getting access to prosumers, to solopreneur, and anyone who wants to run research. That is really the bread and butter of what we're trying to do, is to democratize data for the entire population.
When you look at the company Cookie, then where you had the initial most traction? Because I can imagine that this is applicable to a number of different categories and verticals as well. Where are you finding that you're getting the most traction for the product so far?
That's a really good question there. Typically, when it comes to fast fashion, we do see a lot of traction because things move so fast, right? Of gaming industry, we also see a lot of use adopting it, not from an insights team specifically, but from like the product managers, from marketers, from commercial leaders who wants quick and dirty data that has a level of depth and relevancy to the business. So I would say when it comes to those directions, we are doing really well.
It's an interesting space to be in, I think, because even in B2B as well, I think a lot of people, they struggle to get the detail in terms of like purchasing cycles. And I think one of the trends that's come out, I'd like to hear what Yana is around synthetic data on buyer personas. It's not always 100% accurate, obviously, but the argument is like that if it's 90% accurate and you take in for that inefficiency of 10%, it still helps you to make a decision quicker than waiting for, say, the traditional kind of like go out survey, and it takes maybe 3 to 6 months to get it back. Whereas if you haven't made that decision, you're already behind in the market. I'd love to hear what you think in like kind of the synthetic data piece.
That's a very interesting topic and space that I was originally in when I was still back at Sint. So one of the biggest problem when it comes to synthetic respondents right now is the margin of error. It's really dependent on you as a client, how much leeway of margin of error can you accept. Right now, I've seen a lot of reports that is hovering around 20 to 25%, which statistically speaking is not too accurate per se. And for those who are reporting below 20%, whenever you ask them to present, how did they actually come about that numbers? What was the methodology of comparison? It wasn't too transparent. So until we are able to be transparent in terms of how we run a Turing test, a benchmark test between a real humans that is from the same persona in comparison to synthetic respondents, it's very difficult for a lot of researchers to really adopt it fully. But I do see that there might be a lot of clients very similar to ours in, say, the commercial team who wants quick and dirty data might adopt it over a lot of secondary desktop research data that is already available on the net. A second problem I do foresee is a lot of synthetic responses or respondent. The data is actually created based on statistical quantitative data. And from what you and I really understand is, as a consumers, a lot of time when we make decisions, we typically don't make it out of logic. A large spectrum of it is actually driven by our emotions. And until we are able to capture enough emotional data, combine it with quantitative data, I could be wrong, but this is actually my own opinion here. It's a bit hard for us to find a holistic way to bring down the margin of error because it's always inference and then the logic, right? I would say that, I really need this product. And then I will start thinking, is this within my budget? Where can I find something that is cheaper?
It's an interesting point you make as well, because I suppose with that argument of like synthetic data not being accurate and what you mentioned about to some extent people are maybe emotionally driven rather than like logically driven, there's probably maybe some things that don't make sense that are actually from like sample groups that are not synthetic data, like normal people. They're making irrational decisions, and that's not taken into consideration when the market research is done as well.
Yeah. So when it comes to decision making, it's always multiple layers, right? But the base layer is always emotions. If you don't connect with a brand, if you don't connect with product on an emotional level to begin with, it's very hard for you to find a reason to buy something, right? Unless you're talking about like toilet papers, serviettes, that is 100% necessity where you buy and you go, right? There's an iPhone. You have to be part of this cult. You have to really believe in this vision, this mission, this branding of theirs to actually try to self-justify using logic that this is your product that you want to buy.
How do you, when you look at that then, and when your role as a chief revenue officer, how do you bring that in, like that kind of thinking into when you're growing the business? Is it like, what's been the things that you've done? Is it partnerships? What have you found has actually driven that? How do you approach it?
That's a really tough question there. So let's break it down to three things. Number one, I do feel that partnerships in the future, in the next 5 years, is key because there's going to be more SaaS product coming out. There's going to be a lot more AI products coming out. It's very difficult for someone to gain ultimate monopoly because someone can recreate something using cloud code within a couple of days, right? So the idea is, how do we not interfere with one another business, but coexist together? The only way it's possible is you find a niche market, I find a niche market, we find a synergy where I can leverage on your business and you can leverage on mine. And then we build this network of ecosystem to support one another. So then number two, as ironic as it sounds, in the world of AI, it's actually hiring the right people. Yeah. So as we are in a market research space, and it's very difficult for me to just hire someone that is pure sales and to fluff their way through in a research world because researchers are really sharp. They are really smart. The second sentence you say something that is fluffy, they turn off their brains, right? So I have to hire people who are not just strategic and market research trained, but also open-minded when it comes to adopting AI and trying to find a new hybrid methodology of conducting research in face of the ever-changing trends. So that's the second layer. A third layer is, I would say, a very competitive pricing structure where it's very adaptive for clients to adopt, very similar to how Amazon first play out. Pay as you go, scale as you go, and then, when the time comes where, the client is big enough, and then we can work something out that is more structured, that is more economic of scale for their business. So the idea is not to set a really high benchmark where a lot of Tom, Dick, and Harrys out there, sorry, the choice of words, or in general, prosumers or solopreneur, they won't be able to adopt it. Think about it. Today, you're running a solo business here. You would rather spend that $1,000 on marketing efforts and advertisement than putting in research. Does that mean that you don't believe in research? No. You just don't have that level of budget or luxury to spend on research compared to working on something that will generate actual revenue that hits on.
It's an interesting point you touch on there because it is very true. And if you're the smaller the company, the input needs to get a value much quicker because of the resources. Do you think that there's now with AI, and you mentioned about cloud code and it's been democratized, do you think that research actually that's credible will even become more valuable in terms of because of how people affiliate the value of that linked with a brand? What I mean by this is, let's say the Gartners, Nielsen's, companies like this that have built up this brand over many years, and people have an affiliation to that when, let's say, a CMO or someone is in the boardroom and they say, where did you get this? Where was it stress tested? And they say, okay, I actually used LLMs and stuff like that. Whereas if you say, okay, I actually used this sample group and it's with a Nielsen or with other companies, that will still have as much credibility as just saying it was something maybe that wasn't as detailed in the research part.
I think that's a very interesting topic to touch base on as well. The future of researchers will not be in the image that we have right now. It will be researchers that comes with various tools available to tap on. I would say the role evolved from more of an executional level to more on a strategic thinking level. What do I mean by that? Maybe in the past, we spent a huge amount of time moderating someone, or we spend a huge amount of time when it comes to saying all of the recordings that so that we can find the right verbatim to prove certain points. In the future, it's how good are you in terms of using and tapping onto technology to streamline the entire process and focus on telling a story that makes sense, to really advise rather than just sharing the data with you. We call it insights to action or human in the loop. And that's where I think the likes of Nielsen, Kantar, Ipsos will definitely have a very strong positioning in, especially when it comes to say that, for example, someone at Nielsen could be specialized in the pharmaceutical space. And because they come from that space, they will be able to understand the data a lot better. They will be able to train the AI a bit better. They will be able to co-work and coexist with the AI a lot better when it comes to develop a story, develop a strategy that really makes sense for the business. The idea here is, how do we turn around faster? How do we affordable without affecting the quality of the research? I think that's the key.
That makes a lot of sense. How do you think then, though, like if what you're saying makes a ton of sense in terms of it should make researchers more effective. It should make people that are specialists or subject matter experts in the field have a much better output. When you look at that then in a business, let's say you use the example of pharma. So ideally then, like the decision making should, if this works well, we should see that come out in terms of like clinical trials being faster, drugs getting released, these kind of things. And maybe not pharma is the right example, but are you seeing this impact in terms of how that's actually driving decision making already of being implemented from what with the different sectors that you work with?
I think it's already exists. This kind of mindset and flow already exists in majority of the MNCs. That's the purpose of secondary desktop research to begin with. Question is, how do we make that decision stem on data that is a lot more reliable, that is more accurate, right? Even for the conventional research space, a lot of data right now, especially on a quantitative level, the quality of respondents has been declining severely, which brings us to the next question. Why are we actually running all this research if we cannot guarantee the quality of the data that is being provided? Because you can be the top, you can be an all-star researcher, you can be an all-star product, but at the end of the day, if the data that is provided to you, that is fed into the system, it's subpar, then the decision is going to be subpar. So doing fast versus doing right, finding that fine balance in it, and also bringing that mindset over to AI founders, new startup founders, smaller businesses, and even students, academias, and professors and researchers, and everyone in general, how to make research a staple for everyone.
You raise another interesting point as well, because I think the thing with AI is like that it enables people to do things really faster and it's democratized a lot of things. But you also wonder then, as a consequence of that, is there a quality output that's affected in what you say? Like ideally with good researchers, it should make them better, but it's fundamental. If the baseline of the data that they're working on is not accurate or there's some inconsistent, then the output is going to be very inconsistent in itself.
So it's going to be a bit mind-boggling, but let's take a step back. When you are researchers, there is a lot of human errors. Where are the human errors coming from? Will be areas where AI is going to fail. Similarly, when you look at AI as a worker itself, as an employee, there is also a lot of errors that it's going to have. That is where the human is going to play in. So it's finding that jigsaw puzzle synergy that makes work. And it's not just about, oh, I'm just going to replace researchers altogether. Actually, not as such. I think one of the things that we are facing right now is helping researchers understand that what you're good at and bad at versus what AI is good at and bad at is so different. And you guys can actually work together instead of against one another. I don't want to name the company. There's a luxury brand that is really huge. They have 300 over brands under them, but they only have one research team and one marketing team in each of the brands, which means everybody is going to them for research and data. It's slow, it's slow, it's costly, and it doesn't really make sense. The main team should be working on more strategic stuff. So imagine I can provide a platform like this to every single BUs, to every single brands, to run their own research, to make decisions faster, to get ahead of their competition. While their real researchers, their real insights team focus on what really makes sense. I think that would be the best scenario I can foresee.
Do you think there's a reluctance? I think we know the brand that you're talking about. We won't mention it for various reasons, but I think anyone who's listened to can guess who it is. But do you think brands like that there's a slight reluctance in terms of they feel custodian for these big, well-established brands, and if they go in with all in on research, that it's maybe a thing from culture within the organization, but also then they feel that it's, what would I say, that you're giving up a little bit of control maybe, and like someone that has maybe a very traditional background in research and this new tool comes along, and like what you say, if you use it, this can be a huge multiplier to your profession and your role. But if you feel threatened by it, that there's maybe a slight kind of a resistance in terms of using it as effectively as it could be.
Wow, that's a tough question. Whenever a new product comes out, there will always be the people who are supporters, there are people who are against it. The idea here is let's focus on people who are willing to adopt it, make a case study, and people will follow. Think about it.
The laggers.
Let's reverse the time by 20, 30 years during research. In the past, when we were to run a survey, we were to develop a questionnaire, it's pen and paper. And then, the likes of SurveyMonkey and Confirm SPSS came about. And everybody is a naysayer about it. And you should do it on paper. It feels different, right? But as history has showed, after 5 years, everybody is using it, including the laggers. There was another wave from the Qualtrics. Everybody was a naysayer about Qualtrics, naysayer about Decipher It. But at the end of the day, they adopted. I see AI in user research, AI end-to-end market intelligence platform as a new evolution of the similar wave that we have experienced in Qualtrics, as a similar wave that we have experienced for the SPSS time as well. So question is, how long would this adoption start? What does it take for us to educate them? And for the leadership of these big companies, what is the goal for the next couple of years? Because one thing's for sure, trends are moving so fast that traditional way of doing things no longer makes sense for anybody, even if you were to start a new business right off the bat today.
And it's interesting as well because the challenge maybe for some of those brands, it mightn't just be that they're reluctant to take it on, but it's also the operational challenges as well of the innovator's dilemma. If you have a small company, they're much more agile and nimble. Whereas if you have a large organization, structurally speaking, how do you integrate that into the daily workflows? From the outside, it might seem very simple, but it's like how you actually do that and how you run it. It's not just as simple as, okay, we're going to take out some legacy systems, we're going to put this back in. I guess it's like a phased approach.
I mean, that's a very fair point that you've brought up. But if you think about it, right now, majority of the MNC, how they're operating is the main BUs have a business question. They reach out to their internal insights team. The internal insight will develop a proposal. They either do it internally or they reach out to, say, an agency to work on it. So technically, I think there is a gap between the BU and the internal insights team. Here is, we need to look at all of the other BUs. Are they currently doing any Google searches here today? In fact, for ChatGPT, 75% of people today in the office would have Google open up at their browser searching on something. And that is a fact. Now, which means they constantly have a need for data. They constantly have a need for information, which is already embedded in their DNA. Now, what we need to do is how do we then convince them that this is the next way of doing research, of doing a secondary research or doing a search in general for research to replace the old Google way of searches. That will be the biggest challenge there. And fun fact, our founder, Devin, has already a plan in mind, which I can't really share because it's really strategic, that we're going to launch by the end of April, that essentially going to replace how people conduct searches and researches altogether.
How do you see, like, we look from a B2B aspect, we see a lot now of B2B influencers, and this is like, for want of a better word, of subject matter experts in the B2B space, people that are known within a category or within a niche of being respected, having a fairly valid point of view that's based on reasoning and research and so on. And how do you see that becoming even more important as people make decisions? It's what you mentioned about the secondary data, I guess. Companies do their research and all, but then there's always these subject matter experts in the category that kind of maybe have contrarian opinions or that they give insight that maybe other people haven't considered. Do you see that as being like a key driver for growth in business now as trust becomes a key thing?
I wouldn't say as a leader of a company, of course, you definitely have to take note of all of the influencers and subject matter experts that are sharing on LinkedIn, on YouTube, or even on TikTok. I get it. But we also have to remember the fact that with the power of AI, there is a lot of issues that arise together. So I do observe a lot of influencers, even subject matter experts who are experts in a research space, but not necessarily in an AI space, making certain comments or opinions, which maybe if you are still in a research world, you might not really understand what they are talking about. But if you are in a research tech world, which is where I am right now, it's very obvious that claim it's not backed by actual research. So we have to be very careful when we digest information that we see online. So it's ever more important for all of these subject matter experts online, like yourself as well, to really back up some of your claims and opinions with evidence, with research, with data. Because as an analyst, as a researcher by nature, our goal is really to uncover the truth behind each topic, behind each question, behind each behavior. And we should stay true. In fact, researchers become a lot more valuable in the time of AI because their ability to dig for truth in times where everything can have a hallucination, where data is not vetted properly, where there's no proper QC methodology, becomes ever more important.
The barriers to entry are so low now that anyone could become a subject matter expert if they're consistent enough. But if there's not backed up research and rigor, there can be holes in the argument that they create. One other thing that leads me to as well is, let's say you're in a particular type of industry, and we'll say B2B, And one of the things in B2B is around long sales cycles. You have multiple different decision makers that have to, it's not like one person making a decision. It's finance, legal, procurement, whoever else. If you were to run research on those for B2B clients in particular, would the same kind of rigor would you go through as like what we discussed at the beginning of the show? Would that be the same kind of framework that you would do? You'd have the sample audience, have a number of different questions for them and arrive at the output as well? Or does it depend on the vertical in terms of how you prepare research?
Transparently speaking, there is no hard and fast rules when it comes to research. Even when I was back at Nielsen, every single output, every single research, even though the methodology looks similar, when you really execute it, the way you do it, the flow, it's drastically different. So I would say no, it's not, it's going to look like the same approach, but it's not exactly the same. And having the AI tool itself is what helps you to really maneuver around the flexibility of things, helping you dynamically adapt to the different needs, right? This is what I meant when, where humans, AI have to work very closely together. For example, here, if you're running a B2B research today, samples are going to be a lot harder to reach, right? It's going to be I go to an online space, I go to a panel company, and then I request for it and it's done. It's not. There's a lot of, there might be some NDAs involved. There might be some resistance because of, say, I want to interview some doctors. So I need to make sure that I mask their face, I mask their tone, right? So the idea here is how do I create an AI platform that it's structured, but at the same time, it gives a great level of flexibility to all of the users to adapt to different needs, different BUs, different personnels, different characters. So I think that's where the challenge lies.
It's really interesting. So if I understand you correctly, it's like the frameworks, as in the tracks, can be similar, but you can have very different types of information and output within that framework.
So before AI came about, the output is what we care about. But after AI came about, it's the journey that we care about, not just the output, because the output has become a hygiene.
No, it's very interesting. For companies that would go to you, let's say, let's keep the B2B example. Let's say that we have research in B2B from, well, I won't name the university, but the thing what they say is, say 95% of people are not in market, only 5% of people are in market. And now recent research, so everyone in the B2B community, you're saying then it's a 5% of your buyers are out of market. So you need to be making sure that you're top of mind when they become in market, when they become that 5%. If people were to come to you and just say, look, we only have one resource, it's a university, but they also have paid programs. There's a part of a business to that research. But if you were to look at like how you could develop research, not necessarily to contradict it, but maybe to validate it, is there any ways that, or what I would say is, what would be the time frame if somebody was to come to you and say, we would like to do research on the B2B sector, you commission the respondents and so on? Normally, what's this cycle look like in terms of timeframes when you're working with companies?
When it comes to universities, it's actually a lot faster. The process is a lot faster as long as the person pushing for it is all over it. Based on my experience working with the last one, it actually took 1 to 2 weeks to get an SOW signed. It took roughly within that 2 weeks itself, another week to really onboard them, to get them familiarized with the process. And afterwards, it's intuitive. If you know how to use ChatGPT, you know how to use Claude, you know how to use Gemini, then using our platform is going to be a no-brainer.
No, it's a very interesting space. Jogen, it was a pleasure to have you on the show. I really enjoyed our conversation. If anyone wants to find out more about Cookie, about what you're doing and see case studies, what's going on at the company, where are you most active?
I'm always on LinkedIn. I'm active on LinkedIn since 15 years ago. So it's like my Facebook and TikTok.
Great. We'll leave your details in the show notes as well. Jogen, thanks very much for joining us on the show.
Thank you.